The world's top negotiator is standing by for us today. That's what some people have called him, Chris Voss, the founder of the Black Swan Group. So much of your life every single day is a series of negotiations. Real estate often comes down to negotiation. So Chris and I are going to talk about a lot of these things that are counterintuitive when you get into a negotiation. For example, you actually don't want the other side to say yes and more. It's Chris Voss and I straight ahead.
To Chris Voss. He is a former FBI lead international kidnapping negotiator.
We're going to bring in Christopher Voss, who's a former special agent with the FBI.
Chris Voss, who is the CEO of the Black Swan Group.
We negotiate every day. Anytime the words I want or I need are in your head or coming out of your mouth, you're in a negotiation. The most dangerous negotiation is the one you don't know you're in.
This week's guest is someone that you might have already heard of because some people have called him the world's top negotiator. He authored the mega popular book that you also might have heard of called Never Split the Difference. Negotiating is if your life depended on it. And part of what made him an authority on writing that book is that he was the FBI's hostage negotiation representative for the National Security Council. What do you think? By now, should I be feeling intimidated? I don't know. Maybe I should. He was also the lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. And later, Masterclass made him part of their esteemed faculty. And today, he runs the Black Swan Group, which actually helps you negotiate. He joined us here a year and a half ago to help us with our own real estate negotiations. It's great to welcome back to GRE, Chris Voss.
Thanks, man. I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me on again.
Chris, negotiation is especially important today for real estate buyers that oftentimes don't have the upper hand in today's seller's market. Now, the market's not as tight as it was just a few months ago, but it really still tilts toward the seller. So when we talk about setting the table for negotiations here, Chris, you are extremely high on the emotional intelligence spectrum. We found that out last year. For example, a duplex might have a fair market value of $750,000. That's a fact. But a lot of negotiations are more driven by emotions than they are facts. And I really think that top emotion is that people fear a negotiation due to this emotion of a fear of loss.
Emotions trump facts. So what kind of emotions do you have on your side if you're buying? I mean, there's always ways to gain the edge. There's always ways to connect with the seller. Do they work every time? No, nothing works every time. But where I come from in hostage negotiation backgrounds, so many of the negotiations I was involved in, the odds were slim and none. And I was always good with slim because it's better than none. The same thing applies to all negotiations across the board. You take your advantages where you can get them. The little advantages begin to add up. And then you make a difference. It's not that you make every deal. It's that you make every deal that you should make. There's always emotions in buying. The seller could always connect to the buyer in a way that most people are too lazy to take the time to do. So you gain your edges where you can.
There have been times when I've been competing with others to buy a property, and I have written a letter to that seller and just letting them know very sincerely and openly why I want the property. And a lot of times I found that that has worked despite what the facts were, appealing to one's emotional side.
Well, the letter's a great move. I mean, a letter's a way to have a one-way dialogue with the seller. It's very non-threatening. They have the choice to look at it at leisure, however they want. What you put on in the letter makes a big difference. Are you painting a picture? If you're buying a residence, are you painting a picture of a house or a home? Are you painting a picture of a vision of the future for what you want from the house? Those make very big differences. Now, how much of a difference does it make? Ask yourself this. If you're only a name at the bottom of an offer, how easy is it to walk away from you? You have no personality. You're not a person. I was talking to a real estate agent several years ago, and he was telling me, we're having trouble getting our offers accepted. I mean, we do everything we could possibly do to get to know the seller, get to know who they are, get to know, what they're after, what they're hoping for, and we're having trouble getting our phone calls and emails returned. And I said, that's exactly the problem. And he said, wait a minute, what? I said, yeah, you get to know them. They don't know who you are. You're nothing other than a phone number or the name at the bottom of a contract. You're not a human being.
You're another transaction.
You're really easy to walk away from if you're not a human.
That makes complete sense. And, when we talk about setting the table for a negotiation and appealing to another human, if you will, and trying to get them to buy in, I've heard you talk about how negotiating in the morning is actually important before a person's had their decision fatigue for the day. And in some cases, maybe you're not even looking for a distinct yes or a distinct no. You just need a decision on something before going ahead. So can you speak to that as far as one's circadian rhythm goes and this decision fatigue?
Well, and it depends upon how you're trying to get them to make a decision also. If you're trying to get a yes or you're trying to get an open-ended question answered, everybody suffers from what's known as decision fatigue. Every human being on earth, whether you're Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, there's only so many decisions you can make in a given day. And your capacity for broad-based thinking is limited. Does the decision require a lot of broad-based thinking, in-depth thinking, what Danny Kahneman would call slow thinking? What kind of decisions call for slow thinking? An answer to a what question or a how question requires in-depth thinking.
Yeah.
And a yes is a frightening thing to say because you never know what all you're letting yourself in for. So yes, I mean, the Black Swan team and the Black Swan method, we are out of the yes business. We don't even bother trying to get people to say yes. The crazy thing that we found is that no matter how decision fatigued you are as a human being, you could always say no. So we ask questions where the answer is a no that works for us. Instead of do you agree, we say, do you disagree? Instead of saying, do you have a few minutes to talk? We never say that, by the way. We always say, is now a bad time to talk. Understand how the brain works, neuroscience-wise. Calibrated tactical empathy is a calibrated application of emotional intelligence. What is it calibrated by? Neuroscience. So we just take these things into account, and we're very careful about how we communicate with people at different times of the day.
That's interesting. If you really want to get a yes from a person, maybe they don't say yes overtly. You ask them, is now a bad time to talk? If they say no, essentially that's a yes.
And just redefining the words, because people think that yes is success.
Right.
And therefore, by definition, no is failure. Well, who says yes is success? There's three kinds of yeses: commitment, confirmation, and counterfeit. Counterfeit yes is never success. How do you make sure that you don't get a counterfeit yes? You don't go for the word at all. You're going for agreement. You're not going for yes. You're going for implementation. You're not going for yes. Yes, at best, has nothing to do with implementation. It's aspirational. You aspire that something would happen. That doesn't mean that you've got any implementation worked out at all.
Now, we've learned from you that you do like to let the other person talk first in a negotiation. Tell us more about why that is. Is that because this helps you gather information on how to proceed? And then talk to us about tactics to really get that other person to talk first, if that's where one gets a negotiation advantage.
Negotiation's often been described as the art of letting the other side have your way.
Right.
At the same time, in hostage negotiations, we'd have a commander say, what's it going to take to get the bad guy out? And we'd say, he's going to tell us. You got to let the other person shape the deal and keep them talking until they shape a deal that you like. That requires them going first. So you're in an information gathering process. Now, no matter how smart you are, your information is flawed, period. The other side is always holding stuff back, always. There's never a point in time when you're not, which means there's never a point in time when they're not. It's what's their budget? What's their timing? What kind of pressures are they under? How much do they really care about what's going on? The other side's always holding back information, which means your information is flawed until you start gathering information from them. So that's why you let the other side go first.
As I'm listening closely, you don't really want to get an answer right away. It sounds like to me you're kind of gently poking around and gathering information first. So would it be accurate to say you don't want to see a successful negotiation go too quickly, or else it wouldn't be successful?
Well, you're going to leave money on the table. You're going to be coming to a conclusion that, the academics call it imperfect information. Your information is flawed. It's missing information. It's imperfect because it's either wrong or more likely it's just missing important pieces. So therefore, your agreement can't be the best. You can't be sure that it's the best deal you could possibly get while you're missing information.
Now, we've talked about saying yes and the fact that you actually don't want to hear yes in a negotiation. What about using the word no, or in a negotiation when you have to use the word no and you don't really want to? I know I've heard you talk about it before, Chris, where you say it's best to let no out slowly. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, you got to let no out a little at a time. No can be an abrupt thing to say, and you don't want anybody to be surprised by it. You don't want them to be blindsided, feel sideswiped by having been hit with it suddenly. You let it out a little at a time. You let it out in a way that's collaborative, that gets them to think. I mean, probably the single most famous phrase from Never Split the Difference is, how am I supposed to do that? Is the first way of saying no. Well, that's a collaborative. You're asking for collaboration. You're asking for implementation. You're asking them to take a look at your situation. You're letting out no in its first version. It's like, hey, I'll get problems here. I mean, even if I wanted to do that, it was going to be difficult for me. So that immediately transforms you into a collaborative process. And if you can get the other side to collaborate, that's the first way to begin to test it.
That could be a great sentence, just one question. Rather than saying no, say, how am I supposed to do that? So, Chris, if I ask you to do something difficult, say, I want to buy a duplex from you for $750K, and you're getting these all cash offers, and it's very easy to do that, but I don't have all cash and I need financing, and I come to you, then would it be in your advantage for you to say to me that just wants to come with financing and maybe complicate your life, for you to say, how am I supposed to do that? Because then does it become incumbent upon me, the wannabe buyer of your duplex, to try to explain to you how you're supposed to do that? And then I would fumble, because it's clearly harder for you to deal with me and my financing and the time that it's going to take me, rather than take an easy, quick, all cash offer. Would that be an effective use of that question?
Well, the question definitely shifts the burden for solving the problem.
Yeah.
So that's the point. And it shifts. A how question is about implementation. When you're learning the Black Swan method, we break down exactly what does what. And we have what we call calibrated questions, which are what and how questions. What questions are principally designed to uncover obstacles. What's the biggest challenge you face? What stands in our way? What happens if we do nothing? And how questions are principally to reveal implementation, to solve implementation problems. So how am I supposed to do that is a question for, hey, look, help me with the implementation there. Lay it out for me. Now, if the other person lays it out, that tells you a lot. Either they have a game plan or they don't care. Sometimes the answer to how am I supposed to do that is, that's your problem. Now, that happens maybe 10% of the time.
Okay.
90% of the time, it's a great implementation question. It's a great shifting of the burden. If somebody comes back at you immediately, that's your problem. You've just gotten a lot of information about the nature of the situation. You're not crazy about the information you've gotten, but you just got smarter because you went from wondering about the situation to knowing about the situation.
That definitely shifts the burden back onto me. If I want to come to you with a financing offer, you say, how am I supposed to do that? Is it really my job in that case to explain to you how you're supposed to do that? If I want the property?
Well, the adversary is a situation. So two people are talking, they're faced with different aspects of the same problem. Now, what you've got to find out is, what other possibilities are there? Can we collaborate? Are you going to collaborate? Now, you're in the information gathering process. Part of that information gathering process is, are there other possibilities? If I take the attitude that it's not my job to explain to you how to do it, the other person just found out the possibilities are very limited here. Yeah. That's made you smarter. So how the other person reacts to the request for collaboration informs you.
Real estate transactions are really slow moving from the time that you submit an offer all the way through inspection and appraisal and closing and all those intermittent milestones. So if you, the investor, are out there listening, this could really play into your hands since you're not supposed to get quick yeses and nos. And often successful negotiation is a means of information gathering. And that's really what you have an opportunity to do during a long transaction.
That's exactly it. A real estate transaction is actually a series of difficult conversations. Now, unless you're in a market where they're all cash offers with no contingencies, and that market recently existed in a number of places.
Yeah.
I happen to live in Las Vegas. When I was looking at houses last November, there were long lines out front of houses. They were only open house for an hour or two. They were taking all cash offers at $100,000 over the ask price with no contingencies.
Yeah.
Now, today is the house across the street from my house for sale. They've had several all day long open houses. They get signs all over the neighborhood. There are no lines outside this house. Now, with all day open houses and no lines outside the house, does that mean that the days of all cash offers with no contingencies are gone? I guarantee you, if they've held several open houses, several weekends in a row, and I haven't seen anybody go in this house, the market has shifted.
That's a clue. That's information.
That's a clue. So all cash offers are still out there? Yes. Are they out there with no contingencies? Extremely unlikely, which means the transaction is a series of difficult conversations, and an all cash offer is no guarantee of a close. So the all cash offers are not the strategic advantage that they used to be. The only thing that matters in terms of the money is the seller going to receive it? The real issue is it going to clear the contingencies? They never do. There's always problems. Those are separate negotiations. How resentful is the other side on the downstream negotiations or the midpoint negotiations? And are they going to tank a $2 million deal over a $1,500 inspection?
There is more leverage for negotiation today than there was just a few months ago because you do have time to gather your thoughts and make an offer. You're listening to GRE. Our guest is Black Swan Group founder Chris Voss. About negotiation. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold.
Average Joe invested in real estate and became a boss. Ever compared investments and wondered, what makes real estate special? Inflation will be your new best friend, and you'll be increasing income while decreasing taxes because debt-free is dumb, compound interest is lame, the US dollar is fake, and real estate is real. Real estate simultaneously pays 5 ways.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're talking with the Black Swan Group's Chris Voss. He's got an illustrious negotiation resume. Some call him the world's top negotiator. He helps you negotiate today with the Black Swan Group. We were talking particularly about real estate transaction negotiations. But, you know, Chris, one thing that I've been thinking about when we get into real estate negotiations or any negotiations at all, maybe you're not asked this question very often, but I can't help but think that, you know, a lot of the negotiation videos that I see and the tactics that I read about, you know, sometimes they come off as rather shrewd, and maybe the videos show some figure that's half shadowy and is only wearing gray and black. And, you know, my point is, does humor actually have a place in negotiations? Does that help lighten the mood? Can that help the other side appeal to you with the use of humor in negotiations?
Well, it depends upon the type of humor. I mean, first of all, your characterization, a lot of negotiation training out there is being shadowy.
Yeah.
That's similar to a lot of sales training being very shadowy. Black Swan method's about integrity, connecting as a human, using emotional intelligence. Now, humor has context. Humor's got nothing to do with what's going on. Doesn't really help that much. Self-depreciating humor is incredibly helpful and useful for a different set of very effective reasons.
Self-deprecating humor, making fun of yourself in a negotiation.
Exactly. It is. First of all, you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So the humor probably tends to put both people in a more positive frame of mind. But to incline them, to get them to laugh, they got to laugh with you. And the easiest way to laugh with you is to make fun of yourself, because it's easy for them to laugh with you. You become a human being. And that's the sort of connection that you need to make in order to gather information and make a deal. You want them smarter. You want them seeing you as a human being. You want them feeling comfortable with you. And that's why self-depreciating humor is very effective.
Yeah, maybe making a joke about oneself. Well, I sure don't deserve to buy your property, but here's why I would want to have it. And yeah, making some joke on that. I can see how maybe that would make you likable to the other side. And it certainly would humanize you from your position as a buyer. And, Chris,
and if I can point out, these are all small advantages. So when you start to accumulate small advantages, it doesn't take long before you've got a distinct advantage.
Let those accumulate, and maybe you do have a chance to do those because, like I said, real estate transactions move slowly. They take a long time. A lot of times, again, I'm putting myself in the seat of the buyer here. You have to motivate other people in the transaction to get things done for you. The inspector, the appraiser, the real estate agent, a lot of parties, or maybe it's a contractor that's not getting the hardwood flooring installed before you close on the property. So do you have any tips for, motivating people that need to get stuff done for you and they're just not getting it done? What are the best tactics there?
Well, the fundamentals are still essentially the same. Never be mean to somebody who could hurt you by doing nothing.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much everybody that you interact with. Your interaction with them is either going to slow down or accelerate how they deal with you. Contractor, painter, inspector. They're human beings too. You treat them like vendors. They're not going to be in any hurry to help you. You treat them like a human being and then get them to see you as a human being. The whole approach to tactical empathy is to get somebody to see you as a human being, to bond with you, to trust you, to want to do things for you. So the approach is just the same. The delays to save time are taking the time to articulate to the other person that you know what their problems are. If you're trying to get a contractor in, what do you say to the contractor? You say what's going through their mind. You say, there's no shortage of people like me that are demanding, don't really care about whether or not you make a living. They just think they're the center of the universe, and they want you to get you out right away, get the best service out of you, the best deal possible for you, and they want to cut your throat over the price. That's what's going through the contractor's mind. When you recognize what they're going through, you become a different human being to them. Maybe you don't get a better price. Maybe you just go from last in line to first in line. Time is money. There are all these different factors that make a transaction valuable. That the speed of delivery and the effectiveness of implementation, and then the dealing with problems are as important or more important than the price. And if you start looking at all of these as negotiations that can be accelerated via the application of emotional intelligence, the Black Swan method, now you really begin to have an easier, more pleasant life.
Because someone that's not coming from an emotionally intelligent standpoint, Chris, if they're trying to motivate someone to get something done, go back to the installer not installing the hardwood floor, I think that a prospective buyer might go about it. Maybe they'll get really hardcore and say, hey, here's the time of the essence portion of the contract that you're in violation of if you don't do this. That might be a frustrated person that's not thinking things through with an emotional intelligence. Maybe a better better standpoint, though not the best, though, is to put some sense of urgency in it to say, well, hey, I just want to gently let you know that my interest rate lock is going to expire if you don't get this place ready. Would that be a better approach, or do you have an even careful one? The buyers.
Whose problem is that?
It's the buyer's problem.
Right. It ain't the vendor's problem. You don't motivate people by laying out your problems, because the message you're sending is like, look, hey, dude, look, I got problems. My problems are worse than yours. You got to deal with my problems, because that's what you're talking about. Like, hey, man, if you don't get this done in time, it's my problem. Now, first of all, if you have to say that, you got to say to the person, look, this is my problem. This is my problem. This is not your problem.
Yeah.
My problem is. They appreciate the fact in that moment that you're not trying to make your problem their problem. And you see much more as a human being. It's a great way to ask for help. I mean, I've done that a bunch of times when in point of fact, it was a mutual problem, but I knew how the other side was going to react. Internally, they're going to say, look, dude, that's your problem. That ain't my problem. So what's my approach? If I got to say that, I go like, this is my problem. This is not your problem. This is my problem. And you read the reaction. You're going to know an awful lot. Enough of the cases in time, the other person says, what is it? What is it? How can I help? You got to find out what kind of person there is on the other side. And that's how you lay it out. Now, that's the beginning point. Now, if you're trying to get implementation, also you want to save people from themselves. If the problems are predictable, then talk about the problems in advance. My son and I were having windows installed in his house a number of years ago.
Yeah. And
the window contractor is saying all the same things the window contractors say. Give us X amount of dollars down payment so we can buy the inventory. As soon as they're in the warehouse, we're going to let you know we're going to get them out. And we'll get them out anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks. I tell people 6 weeks. We'll always have them in 3 weeks in advance. It'll be much sooner than that. But I tell people 6 weeks to make them happy. So we're going back and forth with this guy on the time frame. And I said, okay, so since you're going to have them in, you're sure, in 6 weeks or less. So in the event that I haven't heard from you in 4 weeks, then you agree in advance that I get to call you on the phone and I get to read you the riot act. Because we're 4 weeks in and the windows haven't shown up yet. Now, people are willing to talk about problems with a level head before the problems have actually manifested themselves.
Setting expectations early.
Right. And so our agreement is I get to call you and read you the riot act. Now, of course, he's going to agree to this right now because he's making me big promises.
Sure.
What ends up happening? 3 weeks in, he calls us and says, I want you to know the windows are in the warehouse right now, and we're going to get them out to you. And they had them in and installed in 4 weeks before the deadline was for me to give the guy a hard time. What did I do? I dealt with the future in advance. Vision drives decision. I talked about it before emotions were high. What do we do if we got problems? How do we deal with them if we do? Get the agreement before you're in the middle of the problem. So many problems are predictable. If you know what's coming at you, talk about them in advance. And then people then have a vision of the future. They want to stay out in front of it. They feel part of the solution. And you eliminate so many of your problems that it only leaves you to deal with the ones you should have to actually deal with.
That is a great suggestion on how to set the table. And this one has become so important with how the world changed about 2 years ago and having supply chain disruptions for everything from lumber that goes in roof trusses to installing kitchen cabinets to a while it was a problem sourcing garage doors in many places in America. So motivating people to get things done by setting expectations early sure helps. Well, Chris, before I ask you how our audience can learn more about you, do you have any last thing to tell us, especially with the negotiation tip, maybe when you're entering a situation where you don't have an advantage?
Well, if somebody's talking to you, there's always an advantage. Advantage, leverage. If they're talking to you, there's a reason they're talking to you.
Yeah.
Don't discount whatever that reason is. So get in there, gather some information, let the other side talk. They may make the deal with you because you're the only person to let them talk. So find out what's going on. Let the other side talk. Never be mean to somebody who could hurt you by doing nothing. Hear them out, and you'll find yourself making the deals that you should be making.
Chris Voss runs the Black Swan Group. They have a lot of online resources that can help you with your negotiation. They also do seminars. Can you imagine having Chris Voss or someone from the Black Swan Group at your seminar? You know, in all these real estate masterminds and seminars I've been to during my life, I can't ever remember having a negotiation expert there. So the Black Swan Group might be able to help you out there as well. Chris, how else can you help?
Come to the website, blackswanltd.com. Scoop up everything we've got that's free. We got a lot of free material. The newsletter is free. The newsletter is really the gateway to the website, and we've got training announcements in the newsletter. When you come to our live in-person training, it is expensive. And you don't want to come to it right away anyway. You got to be a little bit up to speed. You have to have a good, solid grounding in the free material to get the return on your investment in our live in-person training. So wherever you are on your negotiation journey, we'll meet you there and we'll help you get better.
Well, Chris, it's been valuable, just like it was when you were with us here last year. Thanks so much for helping our audience negotiate in real estate or any part of their life. It's been great having you here.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on again.